I do not like this party political, game playing, saying, oh, well, we're going to do it this way simply to be different to the others. Hang on. There's a country to consider, both the people who live in it and, dare I say it, industry as well.
What difference would it make if a future Labour government were to stop all new North Sea oil and gas developments?
Well, the first thing that would happen is we would be importing more gas into the UK. So that would mean that our gas would be coming from other countries and rather than coming out of the North Sea. And I think that if I can just sort of step back a paragraph, because one of the difficulties that I have with what seems to be all the announcements that are made is that the announcements just pick up one particular part or one particular piece of the whole energy picture. And that means that one's being asked to make a judgment just on one bit, as opposed to what does the picture look like. Now, clearly, if Keir Starmer is going to ban new drilling in the in the North Sea if he gets into government, as I say, the first thing that'll happen is we'll have to bring more gas and oil into this country. Because what you can't do is suddenly, magically, as quickly build new wind farms or new nuclear, or indeed make more solar farms available to people. So you've got the interim you're going to be importing. But the next thing is the more that we build wind and other renewables, the more we also need backup, because the wind doesn't blow all the time and the sun doesn't shine all the time.
But Angela, if we know that the government is not going to allow any more development of these North Sea oil and gas fields, surely the industry will adapt and people will invest in the alternative energy sources, in the wind and the waves and indeed nuclear.
I'm sure they will. But you've still got the same problem that you need backup. Because, as I say, that energy is not available all the time. Unless you only want to run your lights and, cook by electricity or whatever at the time at which the wind is blowing or the sun is shining, and the other times are quite prepared not to have that, you have to have the backup. There's two forms of backup you need. One is called baseload, and that is something that's there and available all the time. Currently, our baseload is partly nuclear and partly gas. The other is the ability to start up an additional electricity power station quickly, because you know that the wind is going to drop, say, in a couple of hours' time. And the only way you can do it quickly is through gas-fired power stations. Now, yes, of course we can have more renewable. That's fine. But as part of more renewable, you've got to sort out the interim. You've got to get your backup and your base load in place. Small-scale nuclear power stations can be built quickly, not the big ones, but the small ones. And you also, of course, what is going to happen with more wind farms is a lot more overhead cables to transmit that electricity. And that's particularly going to impact the east coast of this country, because most of our wind farms are off the east coast for geographic reasons.
How dependent are we on these fields in the North Sea? Because we know that the government has given the go-ahead for some exploration of smaller ones, but there are also decisions pending on this Rosebank oil and gas field.
Well, the dependency at the moment is that approximately half our use of gas, which of course is for gas central heating in our houses, gas is used in the chemical industry, and it's used for electricity generation. About half of that comes out of the North Sea. And the reason that one needs to have new drilling licenses is because you're drilling in a place, you've got a well in a place, and you've used that gas up. So if we don't drill to at least maintain our 50% for the time being, then we will have to import. Over a longer period of time, yes, of course, you can start reducing the dependency on gas, though you have to remember those basic backup requirements are still going to be needed, as I've just said. But just to pick up one and say, we're going to not do that, gives the law of consequences. And the law of consequences in this instance says we will be less energy secure and more dependent on imports. And I don't think that's a good idea. I think that you've got to have your full, all around the piece plan.
But we know, for example, that we've been hearing new warnings that global warming is already on course to go
Yes.
above the 1.5 degrees centigrade, which is seen as a key point for the efforts to control our greenhouse gas emissions. And Labour is saying that this would be part of its green investment plan. And so
Yes.
if you did have a future Labour government saying, right, well, this is part of a wider switch, don't you need to, right at the outset, in order to force decisions on investments, to say, right, we're not going to exploit these North Sea fields anymore?
Okay, Carol. So let's suppose that said. Let me ask you a question. What are you going to do to make sure that you've got electricity on the times that the wind doesn't blow?
So what you're saying is that we would need to then resort to these imports, and we
We,
know that has been part of the reason why we've seen such a spiral in our energy prices.
exactly. So that is what I don't want to have. I think that you can actually, if it's thought through properly, meet both the climate requirements which we're pledged to, and rightly so, increase our renewables, and also reduce our dependency on gas. But what you can't do is turn off the tap at one place and expect everything else to work. It doesn't do it like that. You have to decide what the investment plan is, and you need a lot of small scale nuclear power in there to provide the base load. We need to recognize that it's going to be a long time before gas central heating dies out in this country. That's okay, but just get the projection path in place. You need to work out what is acceptable and what is not acceptable to people as far as wind farms are concerned, which includes the very high cost of building a whole new transmission network, which is big overhead power cables. And you need to set your plan with all those bits and pieces in place, all the pieces of the jigsaw, and then work out your time scale. And
Okay.
frankly, I don't think that any political party has got the answer here. I think this should be an all political party solution. And what's more, you need engineers, and most of them, sadly, they're terribly clever people, but they've got qualifications in languages, in history, in PPE, in economics. This is a big engineering decisions that need to be taken, and a plan in the interest of the country. And I do not like this party political, game playing, saying, oh, well, we're going to do it this way simply to be different to the others. Hang on. There's a country to consider, both the people who live in it and, dare I say it, industry as well.